the old ones, destroy the fifth one. Looking at the third planet, Martian's not Russian yet. Where did all the sky cars go? He didn't even use ammo. A blasphemer, fake messiah, Death Corporation. Take me to Mars, my turn. I'll share water, truth teller, speak no lie. All that Glux is good, but you can let your bricks fly. I give to you my deathless death, thou art God. Now is the fullness. Come to my church, my turn. I'll share water, truth teller, speak no lies. All that Glux is good, but you can let your bricks fly. I give to you my deathless death, thou art God. Now is the fullness.
Hi, I'm Michael Leverts, and this is Fit to be Read. Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein, published in 1961, is a Hugo Award-winning science fiction classic. Though nearly unendurable at points, Stranger is one of the most unique and influential sci-fi novels ever written, and therefore fit to be read. Robert A. Heinlein is one of the most acclaimed authors of classic science fiction, having won more major Hugo Awards than any other writer. Heinlein has written such classics as Starship Troopers, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Double Star, and many others. Heinlein's deliberately provocative Stranger in a Strange Land, the story about the man from Mars, won the Hugo Award in 1962. I would recommend this book for those who like critiques of religion, free will, the human condition, and heaps of social commentary in their sci-fi. I'd caution readers sensitive to outdated and offensive ideas and depictions of homosexuality, women, and sexual abuse. As with each review on this channel, the episode will begin with a spoiler-free review, character analysis, and plot summary to introduce you to the novel. Following the summary, I will announce a 5 likes and 5 dislikes segment that will include spoilers for those who've read the novel and are still thinking about it, or just want to get a little bit more of a rant out of me. Engage with me also in the comments. Let me know what you think about the music that I've included this week and the last couple of weeks. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. And also let me know what you think about this book. Valentine Michael Smith is the stranger, and the Earth is the strange land. Valentine Michael Smith is the man from Mars. Smith, however, is not a Martian. Stranger is set at a point in the future after Earth has experienced a Third World War and human expeditions have reached Mars. Smith was born on the first expedition ship and raised on Mars. Smith, or Mike, is 20 years old when another Earth expedition ship, Champion, arrives and finds him as the sole survivor of the previous expedition. What works for Stranger in a Strange Land is the first third of the book that features adventure, suspense, and a promising fish-out-of-water scenario that any reader can get on board for. Most tedious is nearly the entirety of the second half of the novel that reads like an entirely different story. Mike is certainly the fish out of water. Raised on Mars, Mike's experience with advanced mental acuity, free will and inhibition, spirituality, and society are very much foreign to the reality on Earth. The thrilling start of the book features Mike's detention upon arriving on Earth, plans for escape, interesting character introductions, and sorting out the details of Mike's personhood, property and inheritance rights, and his freedom. Mike is still human, but having been raised on Mars, he views himself and the world differently than other humans. He expresses behaviors and abilities that appear alien and even magical. In the universe of this story, it is presented as plausible that his Martian upbringing simply unlocked his mind and enabled him to be aware of and tap into his full potential. A potential that all Earthlings may have, but have just no idea about. Mike is in most ways more Martian than human, and being a hot commodity of sorts, the powers that be all want a piece of him. Among the most notable contributions Mike introduces to the humans is the word grok and the significant practice of sharing water. Grok is a Martian word that doesn't have an exact translation on Earth, and not to spoil your first exposure to the word in the story, I'll share only that to grok is similar to comprehending, but so much more. Because water is not abundant on Mars, sharing water with another holds significant meaning to Martians, or those from Mars. This features heavily in the story. Grok and water sharing have both found their way into popular culture as well, but more so in the 60s when this book came out than it does today. Mike's transformation from the beginning of the book to the end is a real accomplishment in the novel. Because he is more Martian than human, however, it's void of many human behaviors and emotions like envy, embarrassment, humor, judging others, etc. He's not a character that most readers are going to find much connection with. Where the story begins to fall apart is the middle of the book, as the Fosterites, a dominant political and religious sect of the time, are introduced. Much of the middle of the book idles in religious and spiritual themes, as well as Mike's interest in said themes and his own Martian ideas guiding his reaction to what he discovers. While this only serves to bog down the story, the greatest roadblock to enjoyability is the expanding voice of main character Jubal Harshaw. Jubal is at first a dynamic character. He is confident, abrasive, accomplished, strategic, and brilliant. No one can get one over on him. You want him in your corner, unless maybe you're a female on his executive staff. More on that later. His path crosses Mike's, and he is nearly immediately Mike's greatest advocate. Literally and figuratively, Harshaw is a writer, physician, and a lawyer. It's in that third capacity that he's initially useful for Valentine Michael Smith. The biggest problem with Jubal Harshaw as a character is not necessarily his arrogance, misogyny, and homophobia. As uncomfortable as those are, if those are simply authentic elements of a severely flawed character, written in earnest, it takes on one form. The more distressing form is when a character is written with such villainous traits because, it appears, they are a reflection of the author's own thoughts, ideas, personality, and worldview. A critical take on the book is that Heinlein was promoting an idea of how society should look. If Starship Troopers tags Heinlein as a propagandist for militarism, Stranger paints him as a free-love, no-rules hippie. It's fair to say, benefit of the doubt, that with Stranger, Heinlein is introducing an alternative view of the world, well-crafted at times, that is intentionally provocative. Whether or not Heinlein is promoting an answer to any questions that are raised is debatable. Less ambiguous is the strong feeling that the character of Jubal Harshaw is just a stand-in or a direct mouthpiece for the author. Before Jubal wears the reader down with his always right hot takes, he is exciting, fearless, and a master of strategy. Jubal's character appears to be split between simply being a creative and annoying character drawn by a very talented author, and as mentioned, a mouthpiece for Heinlein himself. To distinguish between the two is to distinguish between words and behaviors. Jubal's actions are those of a dynamic character, but when he speaks, especially in giving guidance to the man from Mars, it is hard to imagine that anyone other than Heinlein is speaking. The content of Jubal's pontificating is crude enough, but layered onto it is the powerful, nonchalant acquiescence and taking for granted as fact validation from his supporting cast, making it unsufferable. The cast never does a double take or reflects on something that is absurd. They never acknowledge in any way that they know it's absurd, let alone contradict him. They are simply just there as props. They justify and normalize his misogyny. The man from Mars might call this a wrongness. There are numerous instances of this throughout the book, none more cringeworthy than when he is discussing or interacting with women, especially those who work for him. These instances definitely impact the enjoyability of the novel. I'll share specific examples in the spoilers section of the review. There were times during the reread that I wanted to just stop reading the book and just abandon it altogether. In the interest of writing a legitimate review, I kept at it. I never listened to audiobooks, but I gave it a shot for this one because I just couldn't get through this book. I couldn't stand reading it anymore. So I listened to a few of the middle chapters, and it was narrated brilliantly by Christopher Hurt. He brought the character of Jubal Harshaw to life. He magically voices Jubal Harshaw exactly as I imagined him, and this surprisingly kept my interest enough to traverse the worst 40 or 50 pages of the book. Robert A. Heinlein is inarguably a talented and iconic writer, and Stranger in a Strange Land is a classic and iconic novel. This novel presents progressive ideas on sexual inhibition, monogamy, and religion, while also featuring dated, controversial, and/or uncomfortable ideas about women, individualism, sexuality, religion, and society. The time has come for me to present my 5 random likes and 5 more specific dislikes for Robert A. Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. Like number 1, as much as the character of Jubal is a curmudgeon and eventually revealed as a bombastic know-it-all with dated views of gender roles, there are many enlightened statements full of logic and rationality. The problem, though, is that when you're so confident and enlightened and present idea after idea, you can't ever miss or you're done for. This certainly isn't his only undoing, but it is where we get our first hint. Even if initially I decided that he is right more than he is wrong in the beginning. Like number 2, there's a lot of truth in one of the main questions that the novel asks, that being, why not choose to be happy? Using a man from another world to deliver truth illustrates how inane it is that we live in a society that tries to stop truth or deny fun. It's all the more laughable that it takes someone from Mars to deliver the truth. The rules for gods are different from the rules for mortals. Mortals are different. Sexual freedom is not immoral. It's what gods do. Therefore, Mike is a god. You can tell because he behaves like a god, not constrained and inhibited like a mortal. Like number 3, the sit down between Douglas and Valentine Michael Smith at the beginning of the book along with Jubal Harshaw, that was an exciting parlay from beginning to end. It was fun and adrenaline-raising political maneuvering. Like number 4, this novel was ahead of its time comedically. We get some really great gems like, "You certainly would, you sleek bitch," Jill said to herself. She had been growing increasingly angry ever since Miss Arden had joined them. And, "Sit back down and for God's sake quit trying to be as nasty as I am. You don't have my years of practice." And one of my favorites, "Write a popular article on the compulsive reading of news. The theme will be that most of the neuroses and some psychoses can be traced to the unnecessary and unhealthy habit of daily wallowing in the troubles and sins of 5 billion strangers." The title is Gossip Unlimited. No, make that Gossip Gone Wild. And one more. "Who said I was wise? I'm a professional bad example. You can learn a lot by watching me, or listening to me. Either one." Like number 5, some progressive representation of sexuality and nudity. Harshaw, flawed as he is, makes a point in no uncertain terms to defend the honor and morality of those who chose to partake in an orgy. Regarding nudity, Jubal exclaims at one point, "I grok Mike runs his household along nudist lines. Shall I cheer, or must I cry? Neither. It leaves me unmoved." Dislike number 1, grok. I'm just not sold. They're trying to have it both ways. It's used heavily through the first half of the book, clearly meaning to understand, connect, feel the meaning clearly. Later in the novel, it takes on more of a spiritual sense that is more conflated, but even then, it's not the great linguistic revelation that it's cracked up to be. Dislike number 2, for every brilliant, exciting strategic move that Harshaw made, there was an equally far-fetched moment. Playing the fake Martian anthem and having Smith sit was great, while assigning Douglas as Smith's attorney made sense strategically in the story. It was one of a number of ridiculous moments. Then there's also just an overall contradiction in Heinlein's fusing belligerence with bluntness and engaging misogyny while chastising close-mindedness and narrow worldview. These things don't fit nicely together. Dislike number 3, the pacing is off. I'll knock books sometimes for taking too long to get interesting. That's not what this is. Stranger takes off at a decent pace, but it hits a long lull in the middle and frankly for most of the rest of the book before it gets interesting again. I can usually accept a lull if there's genius in the beginning or a payoff at the end. While the very ending is decent, Stranger never delivers an amazing moment that justifies the long middle lull. Dislike number 4, the novel is at times brilliant. And brilliant in ways that you know it was ahead of its time and unmatched in those areas where it was brilliant. In other ways, it has since been done better, especially the satire around organized religion. Speaking of which, the passages on religion when Mike is asked to attend the tabernacle service, it begins with some great lines from Harshaw, but then it extends on too long and it becomes tedious. Additionally, when they're talking about giving gifts, this could be its own dislike. This droned on for way too long. Dislike number 5, Jubal could look at her, even use crude language and deliberate indecencies, and not give her the slightest feeling that he was anxious to get her alone and grope her. She was so serenely sure of Jubal's love for her and his truly spiritual nature that she told herself that she could easily share a bed with him, go right to sleep, and be sure that he would also, with only the good night peck that she always gave him. This is where the novel went off the rails for me upon this reread. There is a lot of misogyny in the story, especially during scenes involving Jubal's 3 secretaries. This moment stands out as super cringeworthy. I can't view it any other way than that Heinlein wants me convinced, almost needs me convinced, there's nothing to see here if a boss were to fall asleep in the same bed with his young, cute secretary. Everyone's on equal footing. There's nothing sexual. There's no fantasy fulfillment surrounding it. I feel like he's also propagandizing a similar message to female readers. Hanging out with your boss and enduring indecent comments and little pats on the tush is harmless. Be like Jill. She's cool with me pretending I'm her father in one moment and fantasizing, if I were a younger man, in the next. Stranger in a Strange Land is a classic and award-winning novel that suffers from a talented author's voice seeping too strongly into his characters, a voice that is dated and at many times unfortunate. Thank you for watching. I'm Michael Leverts. This is Fit to be Read. Please like and subscribe and click on the notification bell, and YouTube will let you know every Thursday at 1 o'clock when I release new content. Thank you.